I'm here with Becky Thoseby from Department for Transport, and she's helping me with understanding well-being as part of our balance project, Mind, Body and Spirit. So welcome, Becky.
Thank you.
Great. To kick off, can you tell me a little bit more about your role at Department for Transport?
Sure. So I'm Group Head of Wellbeing at the department, and the title is Group because the DFT is a DFT family. So the central department is about 1,700 employees, and those are the people you would traditionally think of as civil servants, providing policy advice for ministers. But actually the entire organisation is much larger. It's about 17,000. So we have a number of executive agencies. Any of your viewers who have a driving licence will know the DVLA. We also have the Coast Guard. We have a bunch of people who inspect heavy vehicles. So a real variety of demographics. And that presents quite an interesting baseline on which to approach well-being.
Right.
And you asked about my role. So my role is to kind of own the strategy of wellbeing at DFT. And I have chosen to approach that as bringing a culture of wellbeing to DFT. So that's my ultimate aim. And we do this through a person-centered approach. So this means that we don't focus on issues, we focus on the individual. Everyone has the right to define what wellbeing means to them, and the organisation's role is to facilitate them to help reach their best well-being state.
I've been doing a lot of research around well-being. The word well-being has so many different meanings to so many different people.
Sure.
Can you tell me what that is in an organizational context?
Sure. Well, to me, it means about how people feel when they are at work. And there's a model that I really like to use around the 5 drivers of workplace wellbeing, and I'd love to just talk you through that now. Great. So the first one is health, and I think that's the obvious one. We all think of health when we think of wellbeing, and that's both mental and physical health. Then there's security. So people need to feel safe when they're at work, both from threats and hazards in the physical environment, but also psychologically safe. So they need to feel that they can take risks, that they can be themselves, because psychological safety is very important to innovation. Then there's the environment. So people need to be in an environment that they feel they enjoy being in, but also they need to have the tools and systems that they need to do their jobs. Then there's relationships, and for me this is kind of the most important one really. The line manager relationship is the number 1 determinant of workplace wellbeing. But other relationships are really important too. Friendships at work are incredibly important. And then there's purpose. People need to feel that they are turning up at work for a reason. That what they do has purpose, that if they didn't turn up, it would actually matter. So those are the 5 drivers of workplace wellbeing, and the fact that we take a person-centered approach to wellbeing means that we can address all those holistically.
Great. Well, I'm definitely going to look at all 5 of those areas because I think each one of them could be delved into great depth individually. When I'm looking at balance, we've called it mind, body, and spirit. Now, I can see where the mind and the body fits into that model. How about spirit? Where does that fit into the model, and what does it mean to you?
So that's a really interesting one, because I think you could approach it in 2 different ways. You could actually say that that was a 6th driver, right? Or you could see how it underlies some of the others. So relationships, definitely. Relationships feed your spirit, don't they? I think around the security is really important, because if you don't feel safe, how can your spirit thrive and fly? And the purpose is really important, because purpose can be linked to people's personal values. Engagement is highest when there is a good match between the individual's personal values and the values of the organisation. So it can be interwoven, or you could see it as something completely separate. A very interesting question.
Yeah, I think for myself, and maybe you can give me a little bit of advice, being a well-being expert, I think 2018 wasn't the best year for me. Which is fine. But that's where I think I lost some spirit. And where, when you are trying to regain spirit, if you were to look at that model, what do you think is that first touch point?
For me, it would be purpose. So, I mean, in my own life, if I feel I'm losing energy, I would come back to why am I doing what I'm doing? And that is because I have a deep desire to help others and to help other people be their best self. So if I'm losing energy, that's where I come back to, and that would be purpose.
Yeah, great. I mean, that's great advice, and I think that is the starting point, and part of balance is about regaining that control over the things we love to do.
Yes.
Great.
Yes.
But that leads me on to happiness, and you and I had a really interesting conversation earlier about happiness in the workplace. And I think we are driving, some great initiatives to increase happiness. But is there a negative spin on making a culture so focused on happiness and maybe not just on well-being?
Yeah, so this is something I feel quite uncomfortable about. We talked about this the other day, didn't we? I think there is a risk that in the way that happiness is being presented in our society, it can become just another thing to fail at.
Yes.
So I don't personally believe that happiness is a sort of sustainable thing. It's something that happens fleetingly. When you're doing something you love, when you're with people you love, I don't feel happy all the time.
Yes.
And that's where I think mindfulness really helps, because mindfulness is around accepting whatever emotion is present for you at that moment, and acknowledging that there will be negative as well as positive emotions, and that is part of the richness of human experience, and it's all okay. So for example, yesterday, I had a really good day yesterday. I did some things that I found really enjoyable and fulfilling, and when I got home I was just in a really bad mood, for no reason at all, and I just said to my husband, I'm in a really bad mood, I just need some introvert time. And that's perfectly fine.
Right.
I think there is a risk that if we push this thing about happiness is your goal, that then we're not allowed times like that. And when we do have times like that, we feel as though we failed. So that I think there is a dark side. We need to be wary of this.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I enjoyed our conversation the other day, and I've been thinking about it ever since, because that's something I have been promoting within Bridge and within our organization. That is the culture we're trying to create. But there is a dark side. Because where do you gain support when you have to be happy all the time? Did you feel you're the odd one out?
Yes, exactly. And I think there's some research that I've been reading recently, which is around kind of people's levels of happiness. So if you imagine a scale of 1 to 10, some people are just not going to be operating at 7. They're going to be between a 3 and a 5. And so on a bad day they're at a 3, and on a good day they're at a 5, and that is perfectly fine. And there are other people who are operating between a 7 and a 10. And that's perfectly fine as well. But there's a danger that if we're measuring everyone on the same scale, then people who are operating between 3 and 5, and I am a self-confessed Eeyore, by the way, I'm probably at that lower level.
I question that.
But that's okay.
Yes.
So it's about accepting everyone's individual baseline and where their comfort level is. Now, of course, it's not okay if someone who's naturally operating between a 3 and a 5 is at a 1, and that's where we need to be reaching out to people and helping them.
Yes.
But there's no research to show, and this is what would be fascinating to me, what happens if you take a 3 to 5 person and you try and make them operate in that 7 to 10 region. And I myself have tried to do that because, there's been a time when I've kind of bought into this whole thing, we should be happy all the time, and tried to be that. It created an enormous amount of dissonance, dissatisfaction with myself, a sense of failure. And that's where I came to mindfulness, and then I was like, it's okay.
Yes. And it's something that I've been practicing a lot of is mindfulness and also meditation in order just to find my own balance. I guess if I personally was to use that happiness scale, I have to self-admittedly be a bit bipolar in terms of my mood swings. I can be really low or really manic. And that's something that I'm trying to do in balancing that. But I've been using my own measure to kind of reflect on other people's happiness. When I'm in a mood, stay away. When I'm happy, you better be happy with me. So as a leader, what kind of recommendations would you give other leaders that are balancing their own motivation levels, sometimes whether that be a mental state or just because of the stress of work that is then impinging on their ability to manage others? Anything that you would recommend to allow them to bring more wellness and balance to their own teams?
So, I mean, interesting that you should ask that, actually, because one of the things I'm doing at the moment is leadership training for our most senior leaders in the organisation, looking at just that, the shadow that they cast, and how to look after their own wellness so that they're not kind of leaking out to their teams. And one of the things we talk about is self-awareness, because this kind of thing is incredibly difficult. It takes courage, it takes self-knowledge, which is a very scary thing. It's relational, and it's happening moment by moment. So self-awareness is really important. And there's a dichotomy here which I see as really challenging, that actually the higher up the organisation you get, the more impact you have on other people, which is why I'm working with the most senior leaders. But at the same time, that doesn't mean you're infallible. You will have a bad day, and sometimes you will snap or lose your temper.
So how can we take the pressure off leaders so that they can be infallible?
Well, I'm not sure that they can. And this is one of the things that I'm working with leaders around in the leadership training I'm running at DFT at the moment. So we're talking a lot about how leaders come across to others, the shadow that they cast. So it is invariable, leaders have things going on in their own lives, and it is invariable that sometimes they will behave in a way that they don't really want to. And sadly, that's the time that everyone remembers, right?
Yes.
So, and then everyone talks about it. Oh, do you remember that time? And you know what Dale said to Becky, and wasn't it awful? And something we're talking around a lot in that space is the power of honesty. Just saying, look, the other day I spoke to you in a way that was not congruent with the kind of leader I want to be. You know, acknowledging the impact that might have had on that person and saying sorry. That is incredibly powerful, because it's very authentic as well. It's acknowledging your humanity, the fact that sometimes you will make mistakes. And there's a paradox in this, isn't there, that the further up the organisation you go, the greater number of people your behaviour impacts on. But there's not kind of a greater level of well-being or resilience necessarily as you go up. So self-awareness is incredibly powerful. Just being aware of the effect your behaviour has on others, that helps you have a baseline from which to project yourself. And in the end, we are all human beings making our way through life, right? So whether you are a leader or not, that is still the case.
The balance research that we're doing sits under a higher narrative called the human element. Because I believe organizations behave like humans because they're driven by humans. And we're starting the first week of balance around humility. And being more humble. Part of that is self-awareness, and part of that is seeking support. So where do you suggest people that require support to help deal with stress go to within organizations?
Well, it depends what support services you've got within your organisation. And that's where the relationships bit that we were talking about and the 5 drivers becomes really important. If you have a network of friendships or peer support within your organisation, a lot of people will go there. And in DFT, we have all the kind of traditional things that you would expect. We've got an employee assistance program, mental health first aiders. But what we're really pushing is that actually, my ideal is that you would have a good enough relationship with your line manager that is the person that you can go to for support, and you can say, look, you know, I'm having this life event, or I've got a health problem, and you know, this is the way it's affecting the way I show up at work. This is what I want to be able to do for myself, to care for myself, and this is the support that I need from you. That is my ideal. We're not there yet, but a lot of what I'm doing is enabling people to get to that place.
And as a final, how do you define a culture of well-being?
It's just the way we do things around here. So line managers are considering well-being as key to getting the best from their people. Individuals are considering well-being as key to performing highly in the organisation. Well-being is considered when decisions about work and how work is organised are made. It's a thread running through everything.
Oh, well, that's brilliant. Well, I've enjoyed talking to you today. It's been amazing, and thank you, Becky.
It's been a pleasure.
Great.